Chapter 33, Wildlife in the Scrubs. Quite suddenly, the jungle grew noticeably light, almost like mild daylight. Then we stepped out into a blaze of late afternoon sunlight, an open forest pocket ringed by dense black jungle, a natural clearing large enough even to feed a handful of sheep. Squatting just out from the scrub edge right opposite were 100 or more naked aborigines, the warriors vividly painted and feathered, women and children staring silently towards us, smoke from their cooking fires wafting lazily upward. Leaning against the gunyahs were bundles of hideously barbed spears. Light a fire while I fill the billies. I did so. In a moment he was back and the billies were on. He was already plucking a pigeon. I started on another, gazing across the clearing. Here and there a forest tree was beautiful in its bath of fading sunlight. The grass in the center of the clearing had been pulled up, the red earth showing as if brushed with a broom. Considerable labor here, and all over this huge red earth clearing was built a maze of queer designs, as if carved out of white stone. They were stones whitewashed with pipe clay. Paths, straight, circular, and semicircular, were running throughout the designs, a few of which seemed hauntingly familiar. Most were strange. In the very center stood a raised dais of stone, which queerly reminded me of a mighty starfish. All those designs are symbolical, he explained to me. Some, too, are totem and animistic symbols. Those big rounded heaps to right and left of the star represent two sacred mountains, womanhood also. That long zigzag design represents lightning and what it brings to earth, including the connecting of sky with earth, as do those long coils of stonework, which represent thunder. Several of those crossed symbols represent human and superhuman descent and identity with star, plant, animal, reptile, fish. Others are symbols of the gods. The gods, I said wonderingly, but aboriginals know nothing about the gods. Out there are symbolic representations of the gods, he replied evenly. Call them supermen if you like, just as ancient people in other countries did, and so does the Australian Aboriginal, just the same. Those beliefs may have all come from the one source, when humanity was young. You see that large circle with a fiery red center and long white rays. That represents the sun and the life it brings to earth. Those little groups of stones within the little circle represent their group marriage system, and it is intricate, believe me. Others are spirit symbols. It is not allowed that I point them out to you, but I can see the symbol of the demon spirits of the swamps, the forest spirits too, the jungle and gorge, river and mountain spirits, others also. There is a lot of nature and spirit worship in these people's secret beliefs. Spirits are believed to be lurking everywhere, in the whispering breeze, plentiful among the spirit trees and spirit waterholes, among the spirit rocks. They can hear their voices, or such is their belief, can be helped or persecuted by them. They believe they are in touch with the dead. The witch doctor is their close link between them, the spirits, and the superhuman beings, otherwise the gods. You won't see the dance of the spirits. Unfortunately, it is not allowed. But if you saw the witch doctor in action out there, dancing with his spirit partners, I don't think you'd sleep well for a night or two. I don't want to see him. It's not allowed, he smiled, and smiled in a strange sort of way, staring out there across the symbolic grounds of the Gunyas, with their now shadowy groups of people. In surprise, I noticed for the first time how straight and clearly defined were his eyebrows, those cold gray eyes now animated with life. "What are those two big circles?" I asked a bit hastily. "That big circle of white stones around that altar thing, and that whopper circle enclosing all the grounds." "Why," he answered in slight surprise, "those are the spirit circles to keep out unwanted spirits. They were erected at the very last. The witch doctor and his assistants danced all spirits away from what you call that altar thing, which was then enclosed by the circle. No spirit forms, neither from the air, from the earth's surface, nor from up out of the earth, can now enter that circle." Then he danced all spirits away from all the ground, which similarly was fenced while he was still dancing. I said. He brought us both back to earth with a gruff, "Better get a move on with those pigeons." Even as he spoke, the last rays of sunlight faded down into the dark crown of the scrub facing us. The maze of symbols faded into blurs of whiteness. Then it was quite dark. "Do you know these people?" I asked. "Of course. Otherwise, do you think I would have led you into a trap like this?" "Of course not," I answered. "And now I remember you smelt them, or smelt their fires." You remembered just in time. His face wore a cynical grin in the firelight. "Your mind is all het up at present. Do you remember, too, that I can do a little mind-reading?" "You win," I replied. "And what do we do now?" "Eat, then let the fire die down. Rest and smoke. The tableau opens when the moon rises." For several hours we sat there smoking, hemmed in by that circle black as the pit. The clearing faintly lighted by the open sky, stars above seemingly just overhead, and made of bronze gold, glorious to gaze at after the pitch-black nights of the scrubs. The few trees in the clearing were still as if carved from mottled ivory. "I did not know there were places like this in the scrubs," I murmured. "Yes, every here and there, some larger than this, others so small you could hardly build a house upon them. Natural forest, forest trees, forest grasses in the hearts of the scrubs. Strange indeed that the scrubs have not overwhelmed such oases of daylight thousands of years ago. But then the sea does not overwhelm its little islands. These forest pockets are the secret of the scrub blacks' continued existence, for these are impenetrable hideouts. There were and are but few tribes of scrub blacks compared to those of the open country. But for these open forests deep in the scrubs, there would be no scrub blacks. To the open forest men, these scrubs are full of demons, spirits, particularly at night. They are too in the night to the scrub blacks. The forest men in daylight will penetrate the edge of the scrub only a very short distance, whereas the scrub men can emerge and hunt and make their forays out into the open forest whenever they like. When in danger, they simply vanish into the scrubs. They are quite safe then. They make their way to some hidden forest pocket like this and camp in security, both from human enemies and spirit terrors, until danger is past. I can easily understand that now, I said. Once you've explained it, and I see this clearing, what were those white fellows painted with? Some with a white ochreous pipeclay, others with snow white down from cockatoo breasts, stuck on with their own blood. All are aids to illusion. Some have the down plastered all over them, others only upon certain parts of the body, some on one leg and not on another, others with circular bands, others with long stripes. You'll see with what weird effect soon. I did. There was not one solitary glow of coals, not one sound, not one movement from away across the clearing, just a haze of skylight and an eerie feeling as if the jungle were holding its breath to listen. From black sky behind us, a silver searchlight stole out over the forest pocket, growing stronger every second, until suddenly the pocket was a blaze of silver light in which silver trees stood beautifully towering above silver grass. Those symbolic mazes suddenly were silver. The daze was actually gleaming. Away behind by bright scrub edge, even the gunyahs were silvered. I noted the spears had gone. By the farther side of the maze, squatting in a semicircle, with their legs bent under them, were motionless, ebony figures of women and children silvered by moonlight, as one, their clasped hands rose and came sharply down between their thighs, and the human drum, in a startling crash, reverberated throughout the clearing again and again and again. From behind them, within the black jungle, a sudden roar of voices was sustained in an animal savagery as out glided ghosts. Some, I could swear, were floating ghosts that were living skeletons, ghosts all white and seeming almost shapeless, others with but one ghostly arm, one ghostly leg, others all white but headless, others all body but legless. The howl in those voices, which now all merged into one, fairly made my hair stand on end, as they came gliding past the human drum, that now was fairly crashing with sound, as the oncoming phalanx, with stamping feet, added thunder to the sound. I actually felt the earth vibrate as with one shuddering roar they came bounding straight towards us, waving spears and clubs and those mighty swords. I snatched at the rifle, but a grip of steel held my wrist as the jungle man said, "Sit quiet, you fool." Above the now tumultuous drumming, piercing screams from the women froze my blood, and the savages were upon us in a frenzy of glaring eyes and gleaming teeth, some chewing their beards in maniacal rage, as I leapt up and back to ward off those frightful weapons. I reached the scrub and vanished into it to an awful, awful roar. I only realized with laughter when it was joined by the shrieking howls of those wretched women and children, clinging round a tree in the darkness there. I listened with a thumping heart. It was quite a time before I could believe the whole mob were in nearly hysterical laughter. At my mate's reassuring shout, I groped my way back, feeling as mad as a March hare and much smaller. Still howling with laughter, they pranced their way back to their silly women. As grumpily I sat down by my grinning mate. I was still shivering. "They can be frighteningly realistic," he said, placatingly, as he pulled out the pipe. "However, it was all a joke, just their way of saying welcome." "I wish they'd all broken their stupid necks," I replied hotly. "After all," he said, "we are poachers, you know, encroaching on their sacred dancing grounds." "Then why didn't they tell us to clear out? We will tomorrow. Tonight is really only the opening night. They'll be dancing and going through the ceremonies for a week yet." "Anyway," I said, still a bit angrily, "what do the fools think they could do with those stupid swords? They couldn't cut a man's head off with a wooden sword." "They are actually frightful weapons," he replied grimly. "In a surprise attack at close quarters, they don't dream of cutting a man in half, of course, but just imagine the weight in those huge hardwood, double-handed weapons, swung with that maniacal strength you've just witnessed. A victim would throw up his arms as you did, but the sword would swing around and under, and both your ankles would snap like carrots, while the impact of the blow would throw the body yards away. A body blow would break a man's back. He is finished by even a blow down on the shoulder. Just imagine the numbing effect of a blow hurled down. Like that. A man simply crumples up paralyzed." "They're nice brutes," I said soberly. "Oh no, quite natural. I might mention that with our superior civilization, we've thought out some pretty frightful weapons ourselves. In coming years, under the horrors of shell fire, crouching into the very earth under the hail of exploding bombs, the showers of machine-gun bullets." I was to think of those very words, and believe me, how passionately I then wished I were back within that peaceful forest pocket, sheltered by the million trees of that great scrub. Chapter 34 The Jungle Speaks. Eerily beautiful now was the chanting, changing to a haunting melancholy, dying away into the whispering bush, then softly rising in rapid crescendo to a savage roaring of men's voices, above which the shrill wailing of the women was hair-raising, accompanied by the clapping thunder of human drum and stamping feet. That moon-flooded circle, walled in by black jungle, presently seemed rolling with vibration, whirling sound around and around the clearing, holding it to vibrating earth and jungle wall, until in softening dance and song it was slowly absorbed into the jungle and the skies. In my stirred-up imagination, I could actually feel these waves of sound beating around us to be softly drawn away by timber and sky. To this very day I am not sure if it was imagination either, certainly not the vibrations from the earth upon which we were actually sitting. Piece after piece they danced, reforming out behind the drummer, after each silence to come marching back, chanting into that stone maze again, and stamp out into the patterns partitioned off by the silvered rockeries. Solid figures they appeared at times, then eerily separating out. Some appeared as half-bodies of men, floating, others as legs, others headless. This was due not only to the painting, but also to the grouping and movement and their expert use of the moonlight. The jungle man stared as I was staring, absorbed by it all. Only occasionally would he growl an explanatory word on this age-old symbolism. Obeisance to the moon, the mother of life, which brings the tides to the waters, the things of earth and to man. The serpent dance, this goes far back to the dream time, the creation of things. Dance to the spirit world. This dance expresses their age-old beliefs in reincarnation, in a spirit world upon earth, and in spirit worlds up among the stars. Impossible to follow it, even in part. We are watching the beliefs of ancient man, beliefs that were born ages ago. Maybe we are watching the beliefs of worlds come and gone. I cannot understand it all myself, but watch, this is a big gathering, and they are rare now. Civilization has thinned out both the natives and their beliefs. You may be watching one of the very last of the seasonal sacred ceremonies, in this district anyway, and his mouth set in a grim line as he gave all attention to this fascinating thing happening out in this clearing now, fairly ablaze with silver light from the great moon so low above. And now that stone dais in the center seemed gleaming silver. In later years, with slightly increased knowledge, I've wondered whether their paints were dusted with flakes of mica, for under that molten moon the illusion of gleaming silver designs throughout the dance field was perfect. They chanted until slowly, unwillingly, it almost seemed, the last of the moonlight died away over the black westward scrub, and their figures and voices died with the vanishing moon. "It is all over for tonight," said my jungle mate, and I could swear he sighed. "We had better turn in." And he rolled out his blanket and coiled it round him, turning his back to me without another word. I know now that wild scene was a book of primitive life to him. For hours I seemed to toss there, ears ringing with the chanting, the stamping, the drumming, the haunting weirdness of it all. To a roar of triumph, a thunder of stamping and drumming, I sat bolt upright, and the sun was pouring into the clearing, bathing the dais with fire. "I thought that would wake you," came a cynical voice. "Good heavens, sunrise! As you see, what is it all about now?" I asked in sleepy bewilderment. "A triumph song to the sun god, who brings light and warmth raining down upon the path of the moon, who showered fertility down over the earth as she went before. But it is the light and warmth of the sun that awakens that fertility into life. So another day is born, all is well. With the sun cozily risen, the dancers returned to their gunyas. The lubras coaxed at the cooking fires. Thin coils of smoke wispily arose. The jungle man already had the billy on. "There will be no more today," he said. "They will rest and hunt until midnight. By then we will be camping quite a distance from here. Eat up." As he spoke, two gnarled old graybeards came strolling along to grin down at him. He offered them a smoke and a share of our breakfast. They gravely accepted, squatted down, and began eating as if this invitation were fully expected. To my surprise, tinged with envy, he spoke throughout the meal in native language. He seemed to know it as well as they. Swags on backs, we entered the scrub again, the cane knife singing, but he did deign to say, "Those old warriors were two of Christy Palmerston's boys, the only two left, and they are not long for this world," and his mouth shut like a clam as he pushed forcefully on. The undergrowth was not so bad as yesterday, but obstructive enough. As we pressed on through this cathedral-like coolness of greenery, a startled croak ahead as a turkey indignantly scuttled away to foolishly rise in clumsy flight at my mate's loud, insistent hiss, hiss, hiss. Peering eagerly, I saw the purple-scarlet head and neck as it alighted on a low branch to gape back towards us. To the crack of the rifle, the bird came thudding heavily down, and a moment later I wheeled round to a distant, muffled drumming. His face was expressionless as I exclaimed, "Aboriginals again." "No, cassowary." He grinned as if amused. "I see you don't quite catch on," he said evenly to my silence. "That drumming is made by a male cassowary, a jungle bird, the emu of the scrubs." Quietly he described this amazing bird, as vividly as he was to describe many other of the creatures of the wonder life in the scrubs. "Then what is the silly-ass drumming about?" I asked as again, muffled through the timber, came that drumming. "Is that him again?" "Yes. I never could have believed it. Why, there almost seems something challenging in it." He almost smiled. "You really are learning," he said quietly. Well then, what is he challenging?" "Us." "Us, yes, disbeliever." He is answering the muffled report of the rifle, for he thinks it was the drumming of some rival on the warpath for his lady love, so that you see even things of the wild can be mistaken, can make fools of themselves right in their own natural environment. But we'd better get moving. By midday the undergrowth was thinning out, but I was jolly glad when he called a halt. "You can light a fire from those yellowish sticks," he pointed. "Then you'd better clean the turkey so it will keep fresh for tonight." He picked up both billy cans and strode towards the tinkling of water over rocks. I'd plucked and cleaned the turkey by the time he returned. You learn to do things simply and quickly when living in the rough. He was preparing to set both billies on the fire, and I glanced curiously into the larger. It was full of big, fat, green crayfish. In a kicking indignation at their strange quarters, oh, what a tasty dish this would be! "Where on earth did you get them?" I asked incredulously. "In the creek." How did you catch them? With my fingers. Go to hell, I thought. If you don't like to tell me, then do the other thing. He was telling the simple truth. I was to learn, too, that he could even catch fish with his hands. But then he knew secrets much more strange. He chose to camp that night under the pillared shelter of a grotesque monster. In his own tight-lipped way he admired it. This strangler was a wholesale tree killer. It had taken full possession of the jungle right here over an area the size of a large house, and had strangled out everything for its own mighty roots, which formed an unshakable base in great twisted roots that grew upward far into the air to support the gigantic trunk. Those roots grew far down into the earth, of course, but also upward in a maze of lattice work, high as the lower branches of other trees, where they all grew into one another and formed the trunk. These weird monsters, like the gigantic strangling fig, with buttresses large enough to shelter a tent, constantly intrigued me. He's a beauty, said my mate. Each root is a tree in itself, writhing pythons of an age long past, now all frozen into one another, petrified but alive. What strange thoughts you do get. Can you describe the base of this tree better? I couldn't, let alone the effect when the playful campfire flickered those terraced pythons to life. A fantastic scene. I wouldn't camp alone here for all the tea and china, I said, as we lit the pipes. Why not? Who would? What with blood-curdling owls, fiery pythons, howling savages, trees that eat one another, while their cannibal roots grow like writhing snakes, not on your life. He laughed softly, that rare laugh of his. There's one man camped alone somewhere in the scrub right now, he said soberly. Or rather, he's probably got a couple of black boys with him. What's he doing? Prospecting? No, we are the only prospectors in this scrub at present. He is cutting a track from Ravenshoe to Chilverton, or is just about to start on the job. What for? To help open up the country, of course. How would you expect settlers to travel through places like this unless there is a track cut ready for them? They wouldn't dream of attempting it, I replied. What's his name? George Rankin, and he's got 60 miles of jungle country to hack his way through. Good heavens, how on earth will he find a way? Because he's a good enough man to do it, he replied. Then he's a better man than I am, Gunga Din. And it will not be a track such as I have slashed a way through for us two now and then. It must be wide enough for a loaded pack horse. But how on earth will he do that, when there is not even grass in the scrub to feed a horse? He must first scout out the country from forest pocket to forest pocket. If he can find a chain of them, those pockets will be his camps. As he battles on with the job, it will grow into a green tunnel leading from open forest pocket to pocket. What a job! I'll say, but it is the one and only way in which the scrub jungles have been and will be opened up. To me, this chance little bit of news was quite a thrill, to think that a pathfinder was actually now at work in this very scrub. Involuntarily I glanced around, but all was impenetrable blackness. the only sign of life, the firelight dancing on those writhing roots that towered up into darkness. In that deathly silence, the weird thought struck me that the jungle was listening to our talk. Uneasily I glanced at my companion, now staring moodily at the fire. He must be much older than he looks, I thought. He has seen so much, knows so much. He is young, yet he must be old. No, he is young. Abruptly I stood up to throw more wood on the fire. Strange thoughts come seeping into a man's mind when he is working deep below in an ancient riverbed, and yet stranger thoughts by night in the womb of a jungle.